Hey, man.
Hey, what's up, Kevin?
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Yeah. Wow. Is it Tuesday already? I've lost track. We're jumping in a little later in the day and it just feels surreal. Why is it not dark outside right now? Well, we're talking to each other.
It's just another
It's
day
dark
ending
today.
in DAY.
What's going on? Why is it so hot out? Why am I sweating profusely? So yeah, what are you working on, big guy? What's the latest and greatest? You dropped me a little text about Microsoft and Anthropic, which you seemed enthralled about. I don't really touch any Microsoft product right now, so you go to town and tell me why it made you so happy.
I've been a Microsoft hater for pretty much as long as I can remember. Nothing. I think like most companies, I've always used Word, Excel. They have their place for sure, and I think that they're pretty well and superior in some advanced functions to Google Workspace products. And I tell you, even the last couple of weeks have really crept up on me as far as how effective the Microsoft suite has become, not because of Copilot. And I find that really interesting
Right.
because Copilot has sort of been like the Clippy of the AI era where, yeah, okay, does it really do anything? It's pretty expensive. It's
Like
kind of
like the
hard to
Clippy, I
use.
thought it was Clippy. I thought it was Clippy reimagined. I thought it was
Yes,
just
different
Clippy
graphic.
2.0. Yeah.
Different graphic. What is the promise of in a productivity suite? It is the ability to generate, right? But it's also the ability to reference and to be able to create like a central knowledge base of information and share back and forth and whatever. And one of the problems with Copilot has always been that it didn't have necessarily the brain connected to it. Okay, you, the human, are the brain, but the brain in terms of context wasn't really connected. And getting people to use Copilot as a chat interface was the road that was supposed to be that brain, but adoption was really slow. Some organizations leaned into it heavily and have
Right.
prompt libraries and things like that. So it kind of sort of started to work. But the switch that flipped was Microsoft allowing the Claude add-on right in all of these apps. And frankly, from a business, I'm just amazed that it was Anthropic who got here first, given that OpenAI and Microsoft have this long-standing partnership and yada yada yada. But at least at this second, which is May 12th, there is no bona fide OpenAI connector that does the same thing as Claude. So backing up for a moment, if you are a Microsoft user and you are an Anthropic user, do not pass go. Go into your Microsoft account and click on add-ons, and then search for the Claude add-on. And you have to do it across each of your apps. So typically you need to add Outlook, you need to add Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Okay, what does that do? Well, it opens a chat bar, which I think we're all kind of familiar with the idea of a document having a chat bar.
Right.
Copilot's been doing this. So you have some big memo. Hey,
Gemini's
Copilot,
been
tell me
doing this
about
too,
this.
right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
we've been seeing this in the whole Google suite for a long time now.
So the difference is that the documents are actually linked like laterally. So if you open, let's just say you open Outlook and you have some scoping email sitting in there, you can then open Word and say, hey, Word, there's an email from Eli about this scope that we're working on. Can you contextualize that and pull in all of the information? And it goes away. It says, sure. It pulls in that information directly to Word. And then you say, you know what? I need to turn this into a project plan. So I'm going to open Excel and then have Excel reference the Word document to create a project plan. And then, oh, I need this to be a PowerPoint for my boss. So you open PowerPoint and you reference any of the other documents and you connect them all. And now it's just all connected. And then from my own use case, I would then connect like ClickUp to the Excel document and just say, hey, update my project plan on this marketing sprint, assign Eli to all the work, something along those lines.
Interesting. So, and you found these to be pretty stable. Like these aren't breaking
Case.
or asking
So
you,
weaknesses.
like if you give it, like let it always connect, then it doesn't just keep asking you to connect. Like it's seemed like it's pretty robust up to this point.
So far, so good. You do occasionally have to reconnect. I think this is pretty typical of these things. Microsoft being Microsoft, each of them has sort of
Yeah.
their own like access points and whatever. So it can be a little unstable. The other issue that hasn't been resolved yet, again, May 12th, see how long this takes, is you're creating sort of your own little universe there. So when you open that sidebar and you say, go look at Outlook and pull the email from Eli, it doesn't have the rest of your context and the other things that you're working on. So it knows about the email and it can help you write that document. But unless you're using something like ClickUp or Monday or whatever it is, or Obsidian, some central source of information that you can tie into,
Right.
it's not necessarily going to know enough that it can complete the task on its own. With, in our case, again, ClickUp being fully integrated, it's pretty easy for me to call on ClickUp, say, hey, this is the project set we're working on, add to your context, and then be able to develop from there.
Okay. So zooming out here, I feel like now you're back in love with Anthropic. Because I know you do have a lot of clients like on Microsoft, like they're in the Office 365 suite. It was a shortcoming before. Uh, Honestly, like I have been deliberating going back to GPT. I feel like I've just had so much regression, especially on the creative side, especially with writing, with all of the cloud models right now. Have you noticed any differences, like in the last few weeks, of either ignoring instructions, not giving you outputs based on how the projects are structured, dropping some of the connector tools? I feel like it's in the last 2 weeks, especially since we spoke last, it has just been in a nosedive. And I don't want to make and I do this constantly. We both talk about this, like jumping from one lab to the other, and you've got all these workflows that are attached and systems and processes. But yeah, I just keep hearing more and more about all the improvements and how like this new model from OpenAI is just as good, if not better, than the biggest baddest thing that Anthropic has to offer right now. Have you played around with this?
I have. Okay, to answer your first question, have I noticed quality going downhill with
Yeah,
Claude? I have. It happens that the tasks that I'm working on right now don't have as much of that like qualitative edge to them. So it hasn't been a real big deal to me. And I actually haven't had that much instability as far as connectors and things behind the scenes. So I think it's sort of funny. I'm sort of tracking into doing the work as opposed to the work being experimenting with what the work can be just at the moment. And it's still working fine for doing the work. If I was pushing the boundaries, yeah, I'd probably run into the same sort of challenges. As our listeners know, I've maintained subscriptions for GPT and Gemini. I actually am almost actively resentful when I have to open a Google Doc because I think, oh my gosh, I can have a Gemini conversation with this, but that Gemini conversation is going to be so limited and sort of difficult. Whereas if I was in a Word document right now, I'd be able to deploy Claude and like make things happen really fast. So I'm not particularly tempted. I keep meaning to carve out a weekend to basically recreate a lot of what I'm doing in Anthropic and GPT for all the right reasons. It's more stable,
right.
it's less expensive, it's just good to experiment in new ways. But this one, I was completely shocked when I discovered that there's no similar connector for OpenAI into the Microsoft universe yet. And somebody might want to correct us. Maybe it's hiding out there somewhere, but I certainly have not found it. There are a bunch of like aftermarket type things. And once you can do this like lateral communication across documents thing, you realize just how much of like administrative work is that. It's like
Yeah,
transferring from.
that's a superpower. Yeah, and when you say you haven't noticed any degradation, what you're talking about with a lot of your workflows is doing stuff like moving data from one workflow into another workflow, take this transcript, put it into this CRM, summarize this, as opposed to really benchmarking it against some kind of creative output, for example, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it hasn't particularly mattered to me much. But, the other place where GPT has become instrumental for me, and we've talked about this in the last couple of shows, is in image creation. It is absolutely off the charts good right
It's
now.
so good.
And Anthropic is not going to catch up there. So I don't want anybody to listen to this show and be like, oh, they're totally fickle. They're recommending this and that. And, it can be on Gemini, you can be on
We got to
ChatGPT.
try all of it. We got to
We
try
have to
all of it.
try all of it, but the answer
Yeah.
right now is they're all pretty dang good. But there are special use cases that exist. Actually, it's funny. In all three of them, I think Claude Design is absolutely amazing if you're doing that sort of creative work. I think that the Image 2.0 out of GPT is absolutely amazing and being able to create workflows that are easy using their agent tools to do that is great. And outside of some of the Chinese models, it's pretty much impossible to beat Google as far as video in terms of either video creation or video interpretation. So if you're doing these multi media type things and you're kind of pushing the boundaries, you are going to need more than one subscription. But leaning into one of them
Yeah.
as your workhorse and learning how to use it, most people aren't us. They want to wake up, do their job, and get ahead, not necessarily constantly shift back and forth. And I really don't think you
Yeah.
could go wrong with any of them.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I mean, they all do have their specific offerings that there's not always an equivalent on the other side. So, for example, we both use Notebook LM a lot with Google. I'm actually starting to wonder now that the new image gen with GPT is so good. Like, is Notebook LM the only thing I'm really using? So there's also been a lot of rumblings out there with everybody in this model race, and the model's just getting better and better, that Gemini has fallen kind of stagnant as far as its performance and its output. Are you still using Gemini for anything like in your daily driver suite, or is it really video and Notebook LM at this point?
It really is just video and Notebook LM in my day
Yes.
in the daily driver, right? I'm constantly
Totally,
experimenting with
totally.
things, but those are the killer tools that are like, if these are the things I want to do, then I have nowhere else to go but there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I kind of feel like it's Google. I almost have this sense of waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it seems like this is what we've been seeing in the industry is somebody breaks away as the clear leader. For a while, especially beginning of this year, there was a lot of speculation as to if anybody was ever going to catch Anthropic at this point, with just the lead they had taken in coding abilities and creative writing abilities, everything. Like, wow, this is a runaway model. And here we are, trying to weigh the pros and cons of, because I really do want a daily driver, although I do will continue to use all of these frontier models. As far as tying it to all of my different systems, all the connectors, all the workflows, I really would just prefer to lean into one because things do break and you do have to do some maintenance. And there are always ways that you can improve things, and trying to approve them across a bunch of different workflows versus one, it does start to eat up into hours of your day. So I'm almost wondering if any week now we're going to hear a bunch of news that, oh my gosh, look at the new Gemini model and look at all these new capabilities because it's Google. Like, because it's Google. Like, I don't know, maybe they're the sleeping giant right now. But I want to ask too, since you are more of a GPT user than I am right now. As far as the agentic capabilities, how good is that? Like, have you been able to play around with any of that or build anything that you had also been building in Claude with Cowork in that?
So the current status of GPT agents, and that agent term kind of drives me nuts a little bit, is almost an
Right.
evolution from custom GPTs, but being able to do something that has more steps to it with greater ease. And it is click easy. So the example I gave, I think on the show last week, was taking images and taking a one by one image and creating an agent that's then going to rejigger and recreate for 5 different sizes for advertising on Meta or
Right.
Instagram. And there are other ways to do that, but building it was super easy. The results were really easy, and now the files just end up on my desktop where they're still difficult to use from a meta perspective, to be honest. But it's yeah, we're not talking about Meta yet. Yeah, they've got a little ways to go as far as integration.
Yeah. A little bit of catch up. A little bit of catch
But
up.
I haven't had the chance to lean in and recreate like my chief of staff, which has become bloated and ridiculous because of all the sort of playing that I do with it. Oh, now I'm going to connect my Aura ring, and then I'm going to figure out how my smart scale connects to it,
Oh man.
and ClickUp and my calendar. And it's like, okay, come on,
More
I've
things
got to
more
I've
things
got
to
to like
break in my
simplify.
experience.
More things to break. Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to having, a good sprint so that I can recreate some of this in GPT. But hey, look, effectively, if you're a small business, you have 5 people and you're looking at okay, do I switch? You need to ask yourself if you're willing to spend $500 versus spending $125 for GPT Business. You should be using Business because of the shareability, but
Right.
if your people are really leaning into things, you will be on the $100 plan, and that's real for people. So will GPT catch up in pricing? Probably, but at the moment, at least, there's an advantage there, and it's as smart. It is faster. Its coding is better in a lot of ways. It has images. It has a bunch of things. So, sort of choosing if you're going to have like a Claude seat on the side to use design and maybe some specialty co-work type things, other pieces, and your main operation being GPT, or vice versa. I mean, I'm sure people are are kind of going both ways on that. But one of the key questions there is, are your people actually using it? And one of the things that we haven't talked about too much is organizationally the difference between like individual plans and team plans. So the
Right, right, and
marketers
then
keep
also, like,
changing
what
terms.
are they using it for, right? Like, what are they using it for? The big determination right there as to what's gonna be a better choice. So, yeah, the team plans versus these, individual plans, little bits to unpack right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's valuable to understand that one is, hey, business leaders, you have an analytics dashboard in both Anthropic and in GPT, and you can see who's using what when. And well, not necessarily when. Actually, you can see kind of a curve of when, but you'll see how many chats people are actually creating. And if you're an AI forward organization and you're like really trying to lean into this, that number should be pretty big, and it can tell you who on your team is sort of lagging behind a little bit as well. And it can tell you, you know, who deserves a license and who doesn't use a license. Because if somebody's not using it, why spend the money? But then you also have, particularly in Anthropic, the ability to set organizational context, which is really cool. So that you can go in there and you can build a shared context layer across the organization such that when you have a new employee and they have their own little baby Claude, when they come into it, at the very least, it's going to know about the organization, sort of its brand style, its history, background, et cetera, that it can draw on as the context starts to develop.
Yeah, I think one of the big differences that I was seeing is this difference between running all of this like cowork on your machine where the computer has to always be on so that your chief of staff does all the things with all of its connectors and sends you the message and everything versus what's happening with these GPT agents where it's all cloud based, right? You don't have to have a dedicated machine running this or even with computer use. Right now computer use right now still feels kind of clunky. I'm having some success with it in cowork, but it requires you to install a Claude Chrome extension for it to do anything whatsoever. Where again, with OpenAI, it's pretty amazing to see a secondary mouse going and doing things on your computer without any extension installed while you're still using your computer. When cowork grabs your machine, it's like hands off. You no longer have any command over that machine. You got to let it do its thing or you'll just be fighting for the cursor and the keyboard. But with OpenAI, it's worked around that. So that's another thing as I kind of think about the evolution of like personally what are a lot of the use cases that I would go to for AI every day. It's really what do I need to get done and what model seems to be doing that better right now. And I kind of like the idea of not having my machine taken away from me for certain tasks. I like the idea of not having to have it run 24/7 so that whatever cron job it's doing to give me my little report, that's it doesn't matter if it's happening in the cloud. So yeah, as you're talking to different organizations and you're also considering that, like, is that something you think about as far as cloud based versus what I think was a lot of people kind of chasing the open claw model of the mad rush for Mac minis and having a dedicated machine running all of your AI tasks?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mistake to chase this stuff because it's a point in time and it's always going to evolve. And there are certain form factors like that, which I feel pretty justified of bypassing the whole open cloud
Yeah.
thing. That it turned out not to be a great focus at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I get it. there's a lot of risk in that, and I think that it's poorly explored risk, to be honest, that people don't really understand what it's doing. And once a browser-based tool has control of your computer, like, I'm not saying, like, somebody's gonna take over your computer, but I'm not saying that they won't either. And it
I
starts
mean, with
opening
OpenClaw,
itself.
there are tons and tons of cases of that happening, right? Of
Yeah.
people's inboxes getting deleted and unrecoverable, just ravaging, their hard drive of like getting into system files and deleting them. Like really, really bad stuff. I mean, and again, I was really hoping that you had gone deeper on the OpenAI agents because I wanted you to go and make all the mistakes first this time. Me burning an entire weekend installing OpenClaw on a machine and then realizing that it just wasn't gonna do the thing that I wanted it to do. But because of that, yeah, because of that, like I do find peace in the fact that it is not living on my machine, of taking control of my machine, even though I do find a little bit of solace in the fact that it is coming from one of these reputable frontier labs instead of some random skill that I downloaded from GitHub and am just letting it have at my computer. It's moving really quickly, and sometimes it becomes difficult to strike that balance of how much risk do I extend? How far do I push the boundaries in order to get the result that I want?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of worth a pause because you've got to ask yourself what you're trying to accomplish. A lot of what we've been talking about so far today is very much right in just the daily workflow. Getting Claude into your Microsoft Tools suite is not reinventing your business. It is
Yeah.
by its nature, like just eliminating some friction as far as communication. And if I can like get on my soapbox about project management, like it's enabling very rapid and clear project management within organizations such that there are fewer meetings, there are fewer like alignment calls and like all of this other stuff so that you're clearing more time to do more things. And that's what bridges us into kind of what we're talking about with these agents is okay, now that you're spending less time doing like TPS reports or whatever it is that you don't love doing because you have all this stuff integrated and it's pretty straightforward. You're not having to tell other people on your team like updates and whatever. Now it's okay, what are these new capabilities that we can create that can do new things? And are they from a few weeks ago, are they main quests or are they side quests? So, like, what is the main quest in your role? What is the main quest in your business? And how can you deploy an agent in a way that it's going to start accomplishing things in that space? And does that agent need to access stuff in the cloud? Okay, just to get
Right.
data, fine. Does it need to control things in the cloud, as in it's going to have to go operate a CRM? Or does it need local files and the ability to control local apps? And you need to decide how that all works in your universe versus your risk tolerance. And there's not really less risk in giving an agent your logins to your CRM and saying like go forth and use the CRM than there is giving it access to your local storage. One just might have a better chance of getting recovered if it gets nuked.
Right. Yeah. And those core use cases, like a lot of people will use these models for writing or writing assistance or help them drafts, a lot of content production. I've personally seen a massive, massive just degrading of capability from all of the Anthropic models lately on creative writing. One thing, it's funny, everybody talks about the M dash, right? How it's just an AI tell. If you send an email that has an M dash in there, you're just like, wait a minute, did that guy just send me something that was summarized from Chat GPT? What's going on here? And there was a long period of time where you couldn't train the M dash out of any model. It didn't matter how many times you said, don't ever, ever, ever do that. If you had some custom GPT or a project, it would just still do it. And then I felt like we arrived at this time where it actually listened to instructions like that. And not only are M dashes back like in full force, like it just completely ignores it, but this antithesis framing, where everything that it writes or every response that it gives you will start with, "Hey, Kevin, you're not just talking about AI at work. You're discussing a revolution of productivity. It's not this, it's that." It I have gone through a couple times this week. I'll Man, I've just been so busy, but I wanted to screenshot some of these and send them to you, but also not bother you with all this trivial stuff at the same time. But where I will have a conversation that it'll be like round 7. I'm like, "You did it again. That's an antithesis frame. You got me," right? And it just refuses. And I'm talking about like Opus is doing this. It's just it's completely wild. So yeah, I'm always thinking about not wanting to jump prematurely because I get super frustrated with a core set of utility that I'm getting out of something. Because in another week, the dials could turn again behind the curtains, and then all of a sudden that behavior goes away. But I think that's part of this conversation as I'm talking to people about integrating it into their workflows. The things you're talking about, summarizing and moving data and updating CRMs and taking this transcript, are pretty bulletproof, right? Being able to talk across different applications in your whole Microsoft suite, pretty bulletproof stuff. But when you start getting into more of these nuanced use cases, which maybe aren't that nuanced, like I think a lot of people use as a writing assistant, that's where I start getting model envy of like, oh man, do I have to move all this stuff over here and start doing this again? So I don't think you're doing as much of that on your side, are you? With the
No,
content production and
I'm
creative
not.
writing?
And again, this is a point of time. This is the, and you think back to GPT 4.0, and like we were really excited because it got better. And
Right.
it's going to ebb and flow, but the direction is still heading in the right at the right angle. The other point I'll make is that most people's jobs are not doing anything that's really creative writing. Like if you are a marketer or you are an author, then you spend a ton of time doing creative writing. So if that's your output and it's degrading, like obviously that's going to be a huge deal for you. But to be kind of glib, like you can't abdicate. Like this isn't we're not quite in the era of automatic, like full on syndication without human in the loop. And although, we all kind of want that to be the case, that's also not really a
Right.
good thing as far as the hastening of what they call the dead internet, right?
I was just going to
Uh,
say, right, we're just speeding up the dead internet. Like it's what ends up happening. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
define the dead internet
Yeah.
for our listeners.
Yeah, dead internet is basically an entire ecosystem of robots talking to robots. If you've spent any time on LinkedIn lately and you really look at a lot of the content, then the comments on that content and then the replies to comments on that content feels a lot like the dead internet. It's just basically AI talking to AI, and there's no humans involved. And it's just basically spitting a bunch of stuff out into the ether for the sake of it being there. Sometimes that might be to try to game SEO. Other times it might just be content production, but then even the interaction with that content is just other bots. So it's basically looking at this entire digital domain without any people in it, even though it's supposed to be benefiting users, like real human users.
So when the magic content machine gets to the point where all of your content comes out sounding human, aligned, and well, like formulated, and then it gets syndicated, and you have that, and I have that, and Joe the plumber has that is the age of the dead internet. So, you should actually kind of embrace the suck a little bit in that, like, this is your opportunity for the human differentiation. Well, the human differentiation still,
Totally.
still, still matters. And when you think about some more formal communications, like I look at some of the emails that I create, and I think it's a little AI-rific, and yep, there's some M dashes in there. But
Then you
from a
realize it
form,
was you that wrote it, and you've just been talking to AI so
I've
long, you
just
now
been
write
talking to
like
AI
AI.
exactly. I've mentioned this before, but my wife actually does use M dashes, and she takes exception to this entire conversation
Oh,
because
that's
now
right.
she
Yeah.
feels like people are judging her,
Everybody thinks she's a bot.
but she actually doesn't use AIs. I'm torn, but for our listeners in particular, like if you're not doing that cutting edge experimentation, like you do need to watch it. It needs care and feeding, but this is a point in time. And I think in another 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, like we're going to be over some of these humps. And, Opus 4.7 is going to be like the baseline of bad. And it's going to be Sonnet, whatever the new Sonnet is. And we're going to be able to rely on it even more.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I was just thinking about how, writing your own emails or writing your own content or your own social media posts are going to be like the cool kids who are buying Polaroid cameras and vinyl records. It's already turning into the throwback
Well,
nostalgic era. But you're
It's
right,
ar
like, it is there is a way to stand out right now as you see more and more of that out there. Even with Meta, like, on Instagram with ad creation, it's favoring AI-generated video, like, it will push that out further. It's getting more clicks, it's getting more conversions. But again, like you always say, a point in time. How long is that gonna last? And then will it just kind of bounce back to, "Oh, this is really frowned on, and organic content is where it's at." So again, it's all on a big continuum.
Well, it is funny, even in internal communications, since everybody on my team is using Claude and they're using Claude to manage their day, and then they're shooting updates to Slack. I'm finding just sort of the ooziness of the language to be really pretty annoying. And when it's my Claude response to my guy Benson's Claude response, at some point we
Right.
should just be communicating to each other in bullets and move on and not be like, hey Benson, I was thinking about yada yada yada, and then no, it's just like the key part of the message are like the bullets in the middle, and I'm not removing friction in Claude to add weight in the communication in Slack. That's kind of foolish. So there's going to be some restandardization, I think, as far as communications patterns.
Yeah, that part is so interesting. I really wonder which way that's going to swing. We've also talked about how verbose it can be and just the amount of communication and content that can pour out of these models when you have these workflows set up. And if a human is reading it on the other side, if it isn't just your coworker's Claude replying to your Claude, it becomes a ton to sift through. I mean, it really is. Like, it can just produce a staggering amount of output right there. I don't want to go too far down the agentic rabbit hole here because I know that it's not completely widespread, even though inside of our little bubble, it feels like the only thing that people are talking about. And I think it is important enough that OpenAI made it a really big deal when they released those capabilities. But the corporate legal departments are starting to hit a bit of a panic button around, this liability, right? This agentic liability. If they're giving middle managers AI systems the authority to autonomously negotiate, I don't know, a vendor contract or to screen hires, right? I've starting to hear some news about courts starting to see lawsuits demanding to know, well, who's liable? Like, who pays for this when the agent goes and makes some discriminatory decision or a financially disastrous mistake. So I feel like maybe it's starting to change the game when it comes to what we call shadow use, like people using AI at work without actual company authorization. So this whole like bring your own AI era might be nearing an end as the agentic use cases start to bump up and the IT departments are kind of starting to lock down what autonomous tools employees are allowed to just run with in the workplace. How are you addressing this? Like when you're talking to the clients and they're asking you about this, are you just saying, no, don't do it?
Wow, this is funny because I spent a good chunk of my day with lawyers on an entirely different risk front, which
Oh,
is
wow. Okay. Different risk.
yeah, so we need to talk about both of them. This is the overall liability that's being created in organizations through the absorption of context. So that you and I love using our meeting transcripts and things like that. But what if you were
Yeah.
remember the lawn darts? What a horrible idea. We're going to throw a spike in the air and then it's going to come down and what terrible thing's going to happen? Like,
What could go
imagine
wrong?
you have a product meeting and you're talking about like possible liability, and now you're recording all of that. And because you're recording it, that transcript is being stored somewhere. And if you get sued and you've destroyed that transcript, you're going to be in trouble. And if you kept that transcript and it comes up in discovery, then it can appear. But it even goes farther than that. Like, what if you're the product manager who's like interacting with Claude about potential liability around a product? Like, you're kind of doing your job and you're using it as a thought partner. And now you get sued and they subpoena Anthropic, and lo and behold, it turns out your product manager was talking about all of these potential liabilities that come this way. So companies are definitely thinking about this, and they're thinking about it from a policy perspective. Shadow IT is really high on that list for all of the reasons that you gave, but also prohibited uses. So hiring, same example, that you can't just dump a pile of resumes into one of these systems and say, choose the best candidate. If you get sued, you won't be able to prove why you hired that person and what the discoverability, there's no discoverability in the process.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, none
this is
whatsoever.
important. And what's funny is people have
Yeah.
had these AI policies. Any decent sized company has had an AI policy since the beginning of 2023. Like, okay, there are a bunch of these boilerplates floating around and they were kind of dumb. And now everybody's looking at them again and they're like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, what does happen when somebody uses this? What are the consequences? So we are seeing a lot more calls to take a closer look at not just the amplification uses of technology, but also the liability avoidance and things like that. And we're not lawyers, but we
Yeah.
work with lawyers who, frankly, are struggling to understand this themselves.
Yeah, so where are you seeing that fork in the road as far as this is having these transcripts, like just assuming that everybody is going to be running AI transcripts for everything and every meeting and every decision, especially as it involves any sort of potential liability, and that is going to be mandated? Or do you see it being a choice of, maybe we just don't want to implement this in because it's going to open up a can of worms that we're not really ready to address?
I mean, I think it is companies already have policies about, formal or informal about what gets written and what doesn't get written. And, I don't want that to sound nefarious, but the old adage is never put anything in an email that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the New York Times, right? Like,
Or
and
a
the
text
same,
message?
or a text message. Like, I tell my teenagers
Now
this,
I
right?
shudder to think of some of the text messages I've sent you. Oh boy.
Generally about humanoid robots.
I never get subpoenaed yet.
So there's a lot of common sense in there, but what's going to happen is the plaintiff's attorneys are going to wake up and they're going to recognize that this is actually an opportunity. The smaller, the
Yeah,
more decentralized, the more tech forward the company is, the more likely they are to actually be recording everything. And if they're recording everything, then like it can be subpoenaed and discovered. So, with
totally.
like a lot of things, at the end of the day, the lawyers are going to win.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Kevin, it's gonna be a short one today. I know we both got to jump to our next obligation here, but good stuff. We'll catch you next time and talk about further legal liabilities, running local models. Got a long list of things to go over.
Always so much to talk about, man. All
Always so
right,
much.
cool.
Yeah,
Next
yeah.
week.
We'll catch you next time. See you. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to send us a question to answer on the show, email me at elijah@spark6.com. That is SPARK, the number 6.com, or Kevin@ascendlabs.ai. To learn more about AI strategy and training for your business, visit Kevin's company, Ascend AI Labs, at ascendlabs.ai. And to learn more about design and development of custom AI solutions, visit my agency at spark6.com. You can also sign up for my free newsletter, AI Framework Friday, by visiting spark6.com/newsletter.